Hello and welcome to the series where I show you what I'm doing to become a web developer. My name's Craig and this is week 5. This week has been about learning the fundamentals of JavaScript. So that's variables, data types, operators, for loops, if statements, functions, things of that kind of nature. Let's dive in to see how much time I've spent this week on web development. So the total time this week has been 25 hours and 20 minutes, which is very similar to the previous week. It seems to be a bit of a sweet spot for me. I would like to increase that a little bit more, try to get up to maybe 30 hours would be ideal, but I'm quite happy with where I am at 25 hours. So in terms of tutorials and projects, tutorials I've spent 12 hours and 10 minutes and tutorials have been 13 hours and 10 minutes. What have I learned this week? Well, as I said in the introduction, I've been learning JavaScript. In terms of resources, I've been using 2 books and 1 Skillshare course. The first book is just a generic web design book called Web Design Made Easy, and it's not really to do with JavaScript in particular. I think it does have a section on it. It's just something I'm slowly trying to go through to get a more of a broader sense of web design and web development. So I'm going to start doing that one morning a week. The second book is available for free online. It's a PDF called Eloquent JavaScript, and that has been kind of my go-to source for learning JavaScript this week. It's broken down quite nicely. There's exercises at the end of the chapter, which is great to put into practice what I've been learning straight away. And the Skillshare course has just been going over what I've been learning in the book, really. It's following a similar kind of pattern of teaching JavaScript, but it's great to get another perspective of it. Let's head over to the computer and see what I've been building. So I've only built 3 projects this week along with a front-end mentor challenge, but I've rather enjoyed building these projects. It's very fun to start doing some JavaScript and interactivity. The terminal website, I didn't actually mean to include any JavaScript, but I thought, why not? It's a fun idea. So let's dive right in and have a look. So in terms of the navigation page, there's nothing really special going on here. They're just kind of stacked. You know, you got the box layout. I think I've used green for the links, which is a bit bizarre if I'm honest. Let's start with terminal. So I just wanted to design something that looked a little bit like the old school terminals. I say old school, but they still look a little bit like this, I guess. I wanted to use some nice fonts. Obviously, there's not actually that much styling going on here. It's a black screen with green font. I've got a blue button up there for donate, which doesn't actually do anything. I just thought it would be quite fun to put in something which is, like, catches the eye. I'll reload the screen again because the JavaScript, there's a message and it types it out word by word on load. And with this flashing green button, if I click that, it actually brings a pop-up, so I can type my own message and it will start typing it out. So this was a really fun site to build. In terms of, you know, responsivity, again, there's nothing really responsive. There's no media queries being used here, but generally it's a fairly nice, easy site to build. There are 2 issues that I have. One is on my mobile, at least, things like M and W aren't very legible. So maybe a better choice of font would have been better. And on my iPad, which is a very old iPad, doesn't have the latest Safari because it's that old, the flashing icon doesn't actually flash. It's just a solid green button, so I do need to be more conscious of building for other browsers in the future, but I'll touch a bit more on my old iPad for my front-end mentor challenge. So that's the terminal one. Like I say, great fun to build. We'll go to the timer one next. This doesn't look at all visually appealing, but I spent a lot of time on this and all on the back-end JavaScript. My problem I have with this site is I definitely tried to run before I could walk, and I spent a lot, and I mean a lot of time just going through Google and trying to understand how to make a timer work and calling IDs and classes and stuff via JavaScript, which in itself is really good. It's a great way to learn, but maybe it was a bit too advanced for this stage. So I've got 3 kind of timers working on this page. Well, that's a lie. I've got 2 timers working on this page, and the bottom one interval timer does not work. So there's a drop down where you can select the minutes, kind of like the Pomodoro technique, I believe it is, where you work for 25 minutes and stop for 5 minutes. So that was my idea of doing this one. There's a start and stop button, which, you know, have some hover animations to change color. And there's also an audio in the HTML, which I haven't done before, and I need to look into it a little bit more, but it's quite fun. So I've got an audio file in the HTML, and that's played via JavaScript after a certain condition is met. So that's quite happy. So if I just click start on 25 minutes, it starts counting down using a timer. I believe I add a little bit of a buffer to the 25 minutes just so it doesn't do it too quickly. If I click stop, there's the beep. So that was quite fun to do, and the second version is very similar to the first, but you can type in how many minutes you want. So 12 minutes and 36 seconds, and we can start that, and it counts down. On this one I have done a 0 padding as well, so when it gets to say 9 minutes 26 seconds, it'll be 0926. I'm just going to refresh the page because I didn't build a stop button for that one, and again that beeps at the end. The interval timer, I'm not going to try running it because it does not work. What I want to do is you enter your number of reps, your working time and your rest time, and it would iterate, and depending on, you know, I think I got a hidden class down here that would say work or rest, and depending on that it would play either the countdown for working or the countdown for rest. And yeah, I was just pulling my hair out, and I kept googling it. I couldn't get it working where I would understand it, so I put that to rest for the time being, and I would like to visit it again. What was happening was it would just do the entire for loop for the reps first, and then it would start the timer, and depending on, you know, how I was coding it, one instance it would not stop the timer even if the condition was met, so it would just keep going down into negative numbers, and the other time it would, you know, it would just get to 1, run through and stop. So not brilliant, but I have learned quite a lot doing this timer website. Finally, we got the calculator, and I really enjoyed building this. It was just a fun little project to do with JavaScript. This does have a little bit of responsivity, so it works quite well on mobile, and then just on larger screens. I reduced the width of the calculator body so it wasn't overly stretched. But again, nothing major in terms of styling here. I thought the calculator itself looked quite nice as well. There's a few issues that I do have with this. I don't think I've written very clean code. A lot of the functions, so I've created a function which like adds, like I've got a blank text field, and then with every kind of on click it adds something to that text field. So you can see the numbers up here just keep increasing, and then if I click a negative, the minus figure there, it would add that to the text field as well, and then equals would use eval. They're all individual on click methods here, so say think this one's function open bracket, and then that function calls another one called calc, and then on the open bracket one I've got an open bracket as the argument for calc, and then a close bracket, the power symbol and percentage sign, so on. So what would be ideal is if I could say on click this function return the value of what I clicked without, I don't know if that's making much sense. It does in my head, but I don't know how to do it. That was a really fun little project. I'd recommend anyone trying to do this because everyone knows what a calculator should do, so the results are what you should expect. Finally, we got the front end Mentor. So this was just a testimonial kind of page, I guess, with a nice little grid. There's the, I'll actually click in it so you can see it a little better. And the mobile versions, everything's just stacked on top of one another. With my Figma design, I've done the usual with the color template, which is from their style sheets. I've started doing grid overlays just to think of how I can design it a little bit better. That didn't really work, I guess. I wanted to do a grid overlay over this little box, and I don't know Figma that well to do it. So what I've done is these little kind of boxes along the top. So I believe it should be a 4-column grid and a obviously 2-column row. But if we jump straight over to my version, you can see on desktop, generally I'm quite happy with it, but we'll first go over the mobile version because I'm now building everything mobile first. I've created a generic card style and like a main paragraph, subparagraph, to try and reduce how much CSS I'm repeating, which went quite well. And then for each card, I think I just gave it the person's name, so Daniel, and I created the generic styling there. So Daniel, I gave it the purple background. I did a before pseudo element to get the SVG quote mark to come up, and again, like different colors based on the person, and the images were all based on the person as well. So that was quite cool. It was quite a simple layout, but I'm quite happy with it. I did do an additional media query for tablets. Just, I don't like it how it gets really stretched out on a tablet, so I just created this kind of halfway house, I guess. Just a 2-column grid with a stretched grid on the. One thing I'm not too impressed with, I guess, is the alignment. So it's nice that all the names and the first paragraphs are aligned, but depending on the content of the first paragraph, the second one isn't aligned. So it's a little bit of an odd look, but I prefer having the names aligned, which was the problem I had on the desktop version when I first created the alternative grid layout, again using grid areas. I had the text at the bottom rather than this little bit of white space, and I believe it was display flex in the column direction, and it was spaced really nicely, but then this image was down here somewhere. I didn't like how it went like image nice and line, image nice and line, and then boom down here, and it didn't look great. So I thought it's best to have the images aligned along the top. I was quite happy with this layout. It wasn't too difficult. I believe this is actually a junior challenge, which quite surprised me. Again, just using HTML CSS, but still junior. My first junior challenge on front end Elementor. Oh, big leagues now. So I mentioned my iPad before. I've got a really old iPad mini. I think it's like on 12 point something version, so it's not up to date. Well, it's up to date in terms of the kind of version it is, but because it's an old iPad, it's not receiving any more updates. And with this kind of name and image section, I've got it as the display flex, and I was using gap, I believe, and display flex and gap doesn't work. So I actually used a feature query using @supports to check whether if display flex and this gap didn't work, I would then use a margin. So that was quite interesting to use feature queries. It's something I need to do a little bit more of, but just learning little bits at a time, I find that really great. So that's everything in terms of my projects. Like I say, it doesn't look like I've done a lot. I spent a lot of time on Google, which has its pros and cons, on the timer website, but I'm generally really pleased with everything I've been building this week, especially the calculator. That is hands down my favorite. That's it for week 5. Next week's going to be a continuation of JavaScript and web design, with maybe a bit more of a focus of completing projects. I feel I get projects to a good standard, but maybe I don't finish them fully, or there's tweaks I could make. I want to make a bit more of an effort on finishing a project completely. Links to resources and everything will be down below. And as always, if you have any feedback on anything at all, or want to share your own projects, that would be brilliant. And if you have enjoyed this video, please give it a massive thumbs up. And if you want to see more, then please subscribe. I'll catch you all later.